The oncologist's words didn't just echo, they detonated inside me. You have 3 months to live, Mrs. Anderson, unless we start treatment immediately. 3 months. The syllables clung to the sterile air of the consultation room like frost. I sat there, clutching my purse with both hands, watching her lips move, but the world had already gone silent. I'd spent my life helping others survive patients, co-workers, even my own son. It had never occurred to me that the one thing I wouldn't be able to afford was my own life. Dr. Martinez was gentle, the kind of woman who had learned to mix compassion with statistics. It's an aggressive lymphoma, she explained. It's already spread to the lymph nodes, but we do have an experimental therapy high success rate, minimal side effects. The only issue is cost. $85,000. 85,000. I repeated it in my head, not as a number, but as a verdict. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I had some savings, but not nearly enough. My insurance didn't cover experimental treatments. I'd worked 40 years in hospital administration, managing budgets, saving pennies for retirement, and yet, in the twilight of my life, the system I had served so faithfully was telling me to die quietly. By the time I stepped outside, the Arizona sun had turned cruel. The light felt too bright, too clean for a world that had just sentenced me. I drove home in silence, past the same street corners where I used to drop David off for school, past the park where we'd sit on Sundays when life still felt full of promise. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but my mind was already racing ahead. I need to talk to him. He'll understand. He has to. That afternoon, I took the elevator up to the 27th floor of the downtown law firm that now bore my son's name, Anderson and Cole. Everything about it screamed success. Glass walls, marble floors, a view that overlooked the city as if it belonged to him. His secretary blinked in surprise when I arrived unannounced. "Does he know you're coming, Mrs. Anderson?" "No," I said softly. "But tell him. It's important." "Thank you, Selv." When I entered his corner office, he was bent over a stack of contracts, the sunlight glinting off his wristwatch, one I had given him when he graduated from law school. "Mom?" he said, looking up, concern flashing in his eyes. "What's wrong?" I tried to smile, but the words caught in my throat. I placed the medical papers on his mahogany desk. "I'm sick, David. It's cancer. And I need your help. Thanks for watching." For a brief, fragile moment, I saw the boy he once was, the one who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. He stood and wrapped his arms around me, whispering, "We'll figure this out, Mom." And for the first time that day, I let myself believe him. But promises made in comfort often melt under the heat of reality, and I was about to discover just how cold my son's love could be. 3 days passed before he called. I told myself it was because he was busy, because big decisions take time. I brewed tea, prayed, and tried to believe that the boy who once cried when I scraped my knee would never let me die for lack of money. When the phone finally rang, I felt a rush of hope so fierce it hurt. "Mom," he began, voice too even, too rehearsed. "Jessica and I talked about your situation. Our situation," I wanted to say, but I stayed quiet. He continued. 85,000 is our entire emergency fund. Jessica's worried about what would happen if we had a crisis of our own. The words slid through the receiver like ice water. I stared out the kitchen window at the garden I'd tended for 15 years. The jasmine vines were blooming, white against the fading sunlight. Would I live long enough to see another spring? David, I said softly, I'm not asking you to go into debt. I know you have the money. Connected and staled and many to minute. He sighed, that sound people make when they've already decided but want to seem sympathetic. It's not that simple, Mom. We have obligations, the house, Jessica's student loans. We're trying to start a family. Things are tight right now. I could almost hear her voice behind his, whispering, just out of reach. I pressed my lips together. I worked 2 jobs to put you through law school. I never asked for anything back. That was your choice, he said quietly. You chose to have a child. You chose to support me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My son, the boy I'd sat up with through every fever, the man I'd believed would protect me, had just turned my life into a voluntary mistake. My voice broke. David, I'm asking for my life. Fortha. He hesitated. Then came the final cut. There are programs, charities, payment plans. You'll figure something out, Mom. You always do. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The woman who looked back wasn't a mother anymore. She was a burden, disposable, inconvenient. In that moment, I realized something I'd never wanted to believe. Love, when tested by money, reveals its true currency. I folded the medical papers and placed them neatly on the table. If my son couldn't save me, I would save myself. But sometimes, the cruelty of betrayal doesn't end with a refusal, it throws a party to celebrate itself. It started with a notification. Jessica's name appeared on my phone one evening while I was researching medical loans. For a second, I almost smiled, thinking maybe she was reaching out. But when I opened it, my heart turned to stone. You're cordially invited to Jessica Anderson's 30th birthday extravaganza. The invitation read white roses, gold script, black tie only, venue. The Four Seasons Ballroom. The Four Seasons Ballroom. Tickets. $300 per couple. My finger hovered on the screen, scrolling down. The comments glowed with excitement. Can't wait! Jessica deserves the best. A bitter laugh escaped me. I'd spent the last week begging hospitals for financial assistance, while my daughter-in-law planned a 6-hour spectacle worth more than my life. I clicked through her Instagram stories, each post like another knife to the chest. Custom floral arrangements. $15,000. 5-course meal, $30,000. Live band flown in from Nashville, $25,000. Designer gown, $8,000. By the time I added everything up, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. $230,000. That night, I barely slept. I replayed every sacrifice, the double shifts, the nights I'd skipped dinner so David could have enough for textbooks. And now, the boy I'd raised was financing luxury while his mother bartered with death. The next morning, I called him. My voice was steady, even warm. David, I saw Jessica's invitation. It looks beautiful. Think you consider it? A pause. Oh yeah. She's been planning it for months. It's kind of a big deal. I imagine it must be expensive. Well, you know Jessica. She likes things perfect. His laugh was forced, brittle. How much is perfection these days? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Mom, that's not really your business. Humor me, I said. Silence stretched across the line until he finally muttered, "About 200,000, give or take." Something inside me cracked, but I didn't let it show. 200,000 for one night, I said softly. But you couldn't find 85 to save my life? He stammered. Those are different things, Mom. It's an investment, networking, business relationships, an investment. That was what my son called his wife's birthday party, while his mother counted months left to live. When I hung up, the world felt unbearably quiet. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing, until a single, defiant thought rose in my chest, like fire. If my life had a price, then I would be the one to pay it. The next morning, I stopped waiting for mercy and started fighting for my own survival. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had changed, but everything had. I stood in front of my house, the same one I'd lived in for 40 years, and knew what I had to do. The roses I'd planted along the porch were blooming again, but I couldn't stop to admire them. Beauty meant nothing if I wouldn't live long enough to see it fade. At the bank, the loan officer looked at me with polite confusion when I said I wanted to mortgage my home. "Mrs. Anderson," she said carefully, "a reverse mortgage might be safer at your age." I met her gaze. "I don't need safe," I said. "I need time." She hesitated, then nodded. The papers were thick, heavy, final. I signed every page with a hand that didn't shake. Each stroke of the pen felt like both a death sentence and a resurrection. When it was done, she handed me a certified check, $92,000, enough to save my life, if only barely. That afternoon, I drove straight to the oncology department and placed the check on the counter. "Schedule the treatment," I said. "All of it." The clerk looked surprised. "That's a lot to pay up front." I smiled faintly. "So is dying. Lead and 7. And fail it is common with a never." The treatments began the following week. Chemotherapy, the word alone used to terrify me. But now, it was hope in a needle. The side effects came fast. Nausea, dizziness, fatigue. My hair began to fall in handfuls, strands clinging to my pillow like whispers of the woman I used to be. But I endured it all, because every drop of medicine felt like defiance. Meanwhile, social media glimmered with photos of Jessica's grand night. Ice sculptures, golden chandeliers, the caption, "Nothing is too good for the woman he loves." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I turned it off. Let them have their 6 hours of glitter. I had bought something far more precious a chance at 6 more years. Sometimes, as the drugs dripped into my veins, I'd imagine my house, the one I'd risked, standing silently in the dark, empty, but still mine. It no longer represented safety. It represented sacrifice, and that made it sacred. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt powerful, because survival, I realized, isn't granted by others. It's chosen. Months later, when my doctor said the word remission, I learned that living again can feel lonelier than dying ever did. When Dr. Martinez said the word remission, I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at her lips moving, realizing that I had outlived both my diagnosis and my illusions. The cancer was gone. My body had fought. And somehow, I'd won. But the victory felt hollow, because no one was there to witness it. David never called. Not once. Not during the treatments, not after. No flowers, no message, not even a polite text. The silence became its own kind of disease, one that spread quietly, infecting every corner of my heart. I drove home from the hospital with the windows down. The air smelled like rain and gasoline, ordinary things that suddenly felt sacred. I pulled into my driveway and looked at the house I'd mortgaged for my life. The paint had started to peel. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a shell I had outgrown. That night, I made a decision. If life had given me a second chance, I would not waste it waiting for people who had already buried me in their hearts. I listed the house for sale the next morning. The realtor asked, "Are you sure, Mrs. Anderson? You've lived here for decades." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly why it's time to leave." Within weeks, I'd sold everything that tied me to the past. The furniture, the wedding china, even the photo frames that once held our family smiles. I packed what was left into 2 suitcases and drove south, toward Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't have a plan. I only knew I wanted warmth, not just from the sun, but from the possibility of beginning again. I rented a small apartment in a retirement community. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No ghosts, no expectations, no son who decided my worth by a number on a bill. At first, the silence there was deafening. No phone ringing, no footsteps, no one calling me Mom. But as the days passed, I started hearing something new: laughter in the courtyard, the rustle of desert wind against my window, the sound of my own breathing steady and alive. I wasn't anyone's burden here. I was just Eleanor, a woman who had beaten death and was now learning how to live again. But healing isn't just surviving, it's rebuilding the parts of yourself that others tried to break. Phoenix greeted me with heat so dry it felt like truth, harsh, unforgiving, but cleansing. The desert had a way of stripping things down to what really mattered. Out there, nothing survived by accident. You had to fight for every drop of life. And I was ready to fight. At first, I filled my days with small routines. Morning walks along the gravel path behind the complex. Coffee with the retirees who gathered in the courtyard at 8 sharp. We talked about weather, books, the absurd price of medication. No one asked about my past, and I didn't offer it. I liked it that way. One afternoon, a man named Frank mentioned that he needed help balancing his books for a small investment consulting service he ran. "I can't pay much," he admitted, "but I could use someone organized." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Numbers and I get along just fine. That simple favor turned into something bigger. Within months, I was handling client portfolios, researching market trends, and advising retirees who didn't trust the slick young brokers downtown. I discovered I still had a sharp mind. Sharper, maybe, because it had been tempered by loss. What began as part-time work grew into purpose. I helped people protect what they had left, and in doing so, I rebuilt my own sense of worth. Every dollar invested wisely felt like a quiet victory over the woman I used to be, the one who'd once begged for help. Frank eventually retired fully, handing me the reins. I renamed the business Eleanor Financial Consulting. My clients multiplied through word of mouth. Widows, veterans, teachers, people like me who had been forgotten but still had something left to fight for. By the end of my first year, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I'd paid off my debts, bought a modest home with a garden, and even adopted a stray cat who insisted on sleeping on my tax folders. One evening, as the sun melted behind the mountains, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and realized something remarkable. I was no longer waiting for love or forgiveness or anyone's approval. I had become the woman my younger self needed all along, steady, self-reliant, and quietly powerful. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled me. I'd turned my pain into profit, my scars into strategy. But life has a cruel sense of timing, just when I'd learned to live without him. My son came knocking again. 6 years passed like a quiet sunrise, no drama, no tears, just peace. My business flourished beyond anything I'd imagined. Local papers called me the investment whisperer. They wrote about how I helped retirees regain confidence and independence. There was even a photo of me in a navy suit, standing in front of my downtown office. I'd built something strong, not just a company, but a life untouched by betrayal. Until the day the past walked through my door. It was a Tuesday morning when Angela, my secretary, buzzed the intercom. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's a man here who says he's your son. He doesn't have an appointment." My pen froze mid-signature. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then I asked quietly, "Does he look desperate?" A pause. "Send him in," I said. When David stepped into my office, I almost didn't recognize him. The confident lawyer who once hid behind expensive suits was gone. In his place stood a hollow man, thinner, pale, eyes sunken with sleepless guilt. His tie was crooked. His hands trembled when he spoke. "Mom, Jesus, I thought you were dead." I leaned back in my chair. "How dramatic. As you can see, I'm very much alive." He looked around, taking in the polished furniture, the framed awards, the skyline behind me. "You look incredible," he stammered. "Successful, healthy, after's minute, cancer-free for 5.5 years," I replied evenly. "The treatment worked beautifully." "Of course. You wouldn't know that, since you never called." He flinched, the shame visible in his shoulders. "I was wrong, Mom. I was selfish. You were exactly who you are," I interrupted. "Nothing more, nothing less. So tell me, David, what do you want now?" He sank into the chair opposite mine, his voice breaking. "I need your help." Of course he did. Not love, not forgiveness. Help. Then the story spilled out: the business collapse, the lawsuits, the betrayal. Jessica had emptied their accounts, transferred everything offshore, and vanished with her personal trainer. She'd taken $2 million and left him with nothing but debts and disgrace. He looked at me with eyes full of panic. "Mom, I'm drowning. I need $50,000 for legal defense. Please. You're the only one who can save me." I smiled faintly, not with cruelty, but with recognition. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I once told you." But he didn't know yet I'd already uncovered every secret of the woman who destroyed him. I watched him crumble in front of me, the man who once measured success by the size of his office, now reduced to begging for air. But pity had long since been burned out of me. "Jessica," I said calmly. "She ran off with her trainer, didn't she?" "Brad Morrison?" His head jerked up. You know about him?" "Of course," I said. "He helped plan her birthday party, didn't he? The one worth $230,000? He blinked, stunned. "How do you know all this?" I smiled. Slow, deliberate. "I told you, David. I built an investment firm from nothing. You don't do that without learning how to research people." especially the ones who steal. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out a thick folder, dropping it onto the desk between us. Inside were printouts, photos, records, 6 years of quiet investigation. Brad returned to the States 2 years ago. I continued. Completely broke. Jessica didn't stay with him long. She took his half of your money and disappeared to Venezuela. He stared at the folder like it might explode. You've been keeping track of her? Of course. Information is power. And after all, she was the one who tried to bury my son. Of course. He slumped back, running a hand over his face. Good. I hope she rots in whatever hole she's hiding in. Maybe she will, I said. But Brad is back and talkative. He's already spoken with a federal prosecutor about Jessica's offshore accounts, forged documents, and identity theft. David's head snapped up. Wait, that could clear my name. If I can prove she manipulated me. You were a victim, yes, I interrupted. A very willing one. Very willing one. He looked at me, desperate. You have the documents? I nodded toward the folder. Everything the prosecutor needs. And Brad's testimony can exonerate you completely. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence between us, cold and sterile, like the office where I once begged him for my life. He whispered, How did you even find Brad? How did you know what to look for? I met his gaze steadily. Because 6 years ago, I learned that survival requires information. I used to wait for miracles. Now I make them. He sat back, staring at me with something between awe and fear. You've changed. No, I said quietly. I finally became who I was supposed to be. I leaned forward, tapping the folder once with my finger. You came here for help, David, but I need you to understand something before I decide whether to give it. What you did 6 years ago, the refusal, the excuses, that was a choice. And choices always return home. His voice cracked. Mom, please. I'm not that man anymore. Thanks. And man anymore. I tilted my head. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Because before I saved him, I needed him to understand what it felt like to beg for your own life. I let the silence stretch until even the clock on the wall seemed afraid to tick. Then I reached into the same drawer and pulled out a check, $50,000, already signed, already dated. I placed it on top of the folder, like a weapon laid gently on the table. This, I said, is enough to buy you time, to hire your lawyers, to clear your name. And this, I tapped the folder, is the proof that could save your future. His eyes locked on them, like a starving man staring at food. Mom, thank you. Don't. I cut him off. You haven't earned gratitude yet. He blinked, confusion clouding his face. I'm going to give you a choice, David, I said softly. The same kind of choice you gave me 6 years ago. He swallowed hard. What do you mean? I leaned back, voice calm and sharp as glass. When I asked you for $85,000, I begged. I stood in front of you, shaking, humiliated, terrified. I asked you to save my life, and you turned me into a burden. Now, if you want me to save yours, you'll ask me the same way, on your knees. The color drained from his face. Mom, I'm serious, I said. You want that check? You want redemption? Then you kneel and beg for your life the way I once begged for mine. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. The proud lawyer in him twitched, wanting to storm out. But the man who'd lost everything, the one stripped of pride, love, and money, stayed. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself to the carpet. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Mom, I'm begging you. Save my life. I was wrong. I was blind and selfish. I failed you when you needed me most." Tears slid down his face, dripping onto the floor. "Please, don't let me destroy myself the way I almost let you die." I watched him, the same son who once looked down at me from behind a desk, now trembling, unmasked, undone. For a long moment, I felt nothing but the ache of memory. Then something unexpected settled in. Not satisfaction, not revenge, sorrow. "Stand up, David," I said quietly. He looked confused but obeyed, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. I handed him the folder and the check. "Your legal problems will be gone within a month. Brad will testify. The prosecutor already knows your story. You'll be free again." He stared at me. "After everything I did, why are you helping me?" I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. "Because when I was fighting cancer, I promised myself I'd never become the kind of person who abandons family when they're desperate, even if that family once abandoned me." He broke again, whispering, "I don't deserve you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You don't. But maybe this time, you'll learn what it means to." 6 months later, when he walked back into my office with a familiar check in his hand, I realized forgiveness can cost the same as betrayal, only paid in reverse. 6 months later, David walked into my office again, this time not hollow, not desperate, just quiet. There were new lines on his face, but they weren't from arrogance or worry. They were from growth. He placed an envelope on my desk and took a step back, his voice steady. "I've been working on this for months. It's not enough to make up for what I did, but it's something I need to do." Inside was a cashier's check, $85,000, the exact amount that once separated my life from his comfort. I stared at it for a long time, not because of the number, but because of what it meant. The circle had closed. The debt, emotional, moral, human, had finally been acknowledged. He spoke softly. "I know you don't need the money, Mom, but I need to give it. Because for 6 years, I lived with the memory of your voice begging for life, and I chose silence. I can't change what I did, but I can start being the kind of man who would never make that choice again." Wanted. I folded the check and slid it back toward him. "Keep it, David. Use it for something good." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Turn it into redemption. Help someone who doesn't have anyone to help them. A single mother, a patient who can't afford treatment, someone who still believes love can save them before the world teaches them otherwise." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I will." We talked for hours that day, not about money or guilt, but about life, about how pain can be a teacher if you're brave enough to listen. He told me about his new law practice, elder law and fraud recovery, helping seniors who'd been taken advantage of, people like me. For the first time since he was a boy, I believed in him again. When he left, I walked to the window, holding the check he'd given back to me after making a copy. I placed it in a small frame beside my first business license. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that love without boundaries becomes slavery, that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom earned the hard way, and that money, no matter how much, can't buy redemption, only choices can. Months later, I used that $85,000 to start a small foundation, the Anderson Fund for Life, providing treatment grants for cancer patients with no family support. Every time I signed a new check to save a stranger's life, I felt something heal inside me. In the end, my son learned that love is not unconditional, it's accountable. And I learned that surviving isn't enough. You have to use your survival to teach others how to live. Because forgiveness, like investment, only grows when you give it to those who need it most.